Welcome to the Dr. Ed Show. I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski. You know, we don't diagnose here, nor do we treat, but we educate and inform, hoping to empower you to be in charge of your own health and wellness. And that's key here, empowering you to be in charge. You know, everybody has an opinion, but you need to be informed so that you can make the proper decisions. Informed consent, it's called. And over the years of doing this show, I think we've had a number of guests that really have enlightened your life and maybe even changed it. And today our guest is going to do that for you. He's an incredible man with an incredible concept that can over-empower your health to make it well. And that's what we're about. You know, you can listen to my live show every Saturday morning from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. on AM 1250 The Answer. It's the Dr. Ed Show. And where we have multiple guests that come on to do the same thing. And we've been doing this show for 19 years, and I would say my next guest is one of the most exciting people I've ever come across, and I've met a lot of people. And let's welcome today Dr. Sam Shepard. Dr. Shepard, thank you so much for coming on. You were on my radio show a few weeks ago, and the response I got was incredible because people took home information that I think will actually change their lives and change their health and wellness. And that's so important today because we're being bombarded by toxins, we're being bombarded by bacteria, viruses, some man-made, some not man-made. So we really have a battle that we have to fight. So I'd like a little bit of background. I know that you're an inventor, a physicist, a author, and your degree is?
My undergraduate degrees were in chemistry and physics. My bachelor's of science is in chemical engineering. My master's is in biochemical engineering with an emphasis in environmental science. So that's what got me into the biology side of it, is the biological impacts on environmental science.
And you were educated at what universities?
Went to a high university, and that was for all my undergraduate work. Went to graduate school at Murray State University in Kentucky.
So you're from the Midwest?
Yeah, I'm just down the road, Wheeling, West Virginia.
Ah, you're not far from here. Yeah. And you're living where now?
I live in Columbia, South Carolina. I thought I was going to retire, and I'm not sure what that means anymore.
No, I know, I hear you.
But we sort of struggle with it. I guess as long as we still have this.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what retirement
As long
means.
as the mind is working.
That's
and
right.
that's actually a great topic on what you do and how to make that mind continue to work into your old age.
That's exactly right.
And as long as you're able to be ambient, to be able to walk around and move around, there's no stopping.
That's it. It's not about the quantity of our life. No one knows how long they're going to live. It's all about the quality of our life, how to get through the journey of life and enjoy it.
Exactly. What was your first job?
Coal miner. I worked...
West Virginia? That goes hand in hand with Western Pennsylvania?
I worked in number 3 coal mine for North America, 1,100 feet underground. And at that point I was a laborer, and I spent a lot of time on my knees with the ceiling that I worked was about 4.5 feet. So 8 hours a day on your knees on knee pads shoveling coal onto a belt that had fallen off. That was my very first job.
And that was hard labor.
It was tough. At that time, and you may be able to relate to this too, I really had 3 choices. I could work in the coal mine, I could go to college, or I could go to Vietnam. Coal mine didn't look like a career to me. In Vietnam, I'm not sure that was really where I wanted to go either, but so I decided to go the college route.
Yeah, I never had that. I was never, Vietnam wasn't a concern for me. And my father was an educator, and everyone in his family went to Pitt, and I was told, you're going to college and you're going to Pitt. We didn't have a choice. I went to W&J to his dismay. But even to medical school, I went to Case Western Reserve to his dismay, but because he was a Pitt guy, my brothers, all of the cousins are all Pitt, Except on my mother's side, we had a few that went to W&J, and
I had an offer to play football at Case Western.
Is that right?
And chose not to do it.
Wonderful school.
Yeah.
I loved it. I never had a bad moment at W&J or at Case Western.
Yeah.
So, and I know some people that went to Pitt didn't have such a great time. But you do have experiences in life that kind of make you jump to something else that you might have not even considered.
Yeah, I spent most of my life in the petrochemical industry. My background pushed me into polymers. So I built polystyrene reactors, polysulfone reactors, worked in polyvinyl chloride, and created those plastics. So I was a polymer engineer.
We need to explain that a little more, because everything is a polymer. Every product that we use has this.
Sure does. Even in our own bodies. I was going to write a book once called Life is Nothing More Than Soap Bubbles and Plastic. Every cell is basically a soap bubble, a phospholipid membrane. Sam was blowing bubbles through the little soap things that the kids play with. And the plastics are our proteins. Amino acids are very similar to nylon. They're just linked polymers, many units attached together to make a protein of a certain length. The real key is how nature folds those proteins back on themselves to get the functionality of that specific protein.
So we eat protein, and everybody talks about, bodybuilders want to take protein, and protein, it keeps us alive. But isn't the protein, it's the protein.
It's the amino acids.
The body breaks down the amino acids and then reassembles them for what we need. So you and I can eat the same piece of steak, same cut of steak, but you're going to get something out of it differently than I am.
Right. If we eat a protein from a cow, we're not going to be cows. We can't use that protein. So what happens is it gets denatured, either through our stomach or into our small bowel. And think of a protein as a pearl necklace. Each pearl is a different amino acid stuck together. So when we eat a beef or a fish or a chicken or whatever, we crack each one of those amino acids off, and we reassemble those into human protein that we use in every cell.
So does the quality of protein matter?
It's not so much the amino acid. The amino acid is unique, and it doesn't change much. It can change its three-dimensional shape, but it's what's in the protein that affects the quality of what we're eating.
So if I eat an egg and I say there's so much misinformation out there, first of all, and we're going to throw that aside. But if I eat an egg that says organic, free range, and then there's all kind of definitions to the word free range and what it means, and you really have to look into what that company's doing. But a chicken in nature eats bugs, grasses, things like that. They don't eat corn and soy. So if I eat an egg where they're fed corn and soy, am I eating corn and soy?
Not necessarily, because the chicken breaks the protein down too. It's what they pick up that can be the problem. I worked on a project in Mexico where nobody's really probably heard of this. There were about 36,000 deaths caused by a parasite called Tinea solium. And that parasite is a pork worm. It's a pork parasite. And the pork protein's fine. The parasite isn't. So you got to look at what is there. Proteins are proteins. We break them down into the 21 amino acids that we need to survive. And that's one of the issues I have with vegetarians, is usually there's 9 amino acids that vegetarians are missing in their diet. There's some vegetarians, like Dr. Bishi in New York. He's 92, I think, now. He sort of started the vegetarian, raw vegan diet. He takes in all 21 amino acids. He knows how to do it. How many vegetarians eat pumpkin? Pumpkin has 5 of the essential amino acids just in the flesh of the pumpkin. So protein is protein. It's just a combination of amino acids that we can use.
Well, we have essential amino acids and non-essential. Would you
Correct.
explain that for us?
Yeah, essential amino acids are those that we have to have. We may not produce them, but we have to have those. So we get those by eating food.
So if we're limiting our diet that doesn't have those essential amino acids, then we don't have them in our system.
No, what will happen is you'll lose muscle tone. Your body will start deteriorating your muscle to get those amino acids.
And that's the biggest.
That's why you lose weight.
And that's the biggest problem with a vegetarian diet.
Correct.
My understanding, and you can confirm this or not, is hemp is the only plant that has all the amino acids.
Has all of them.
Yeah.
It's not easy to get to because there's a cellulosic intermediate in some cases you have to go through. But there's certain plants. There's is it selenium? I think might be. Selenium's not an amino acid, but it's essential for an amino acid. That's one that we may be a little bit short on. But
there's B12 as well.
B12 is another one, and
Yeah.
B12 is essential because that's sort of what sparks our conversion from ADP to ATP. That's how we get our energy.
Well, those two things you just mentioned, selenium and B12, are functional for thyroid function.
Absolutely.
And without them, your thyroid, I don't care if you're making all the T4 and T3 that you need.
Doesn't make any
It
difference.
doesn't make any difference because you can't convert it.
Yeah. One of the things that we get into quite frequently is everybody thinks that if they take A, then it'll solve the problem of B. The problem is that when you take A, there's 20 other chemical reactions have to happen before you get to B. And anything that's interrupted in any one of those pathways shuts down the system. Thyroid is a classic example.
Yeah, without proper thyroid function and conversion, nothing works.
That's exactly right. You get into your autoimmune disease, your body tries to reach a new homeostasis. Think of it as a box. We go through life living at different places, different dots inside that box. That's called homeostasis. Depending on how much stress we're under, what our diet is, if we're running a marathon, our homeostasis moves. Our body will change its equilibrium point based on its need. And if we fall outside that box, we die.
So you're talking about balance.
Balance, equilibrium,
Yeah.
maintaining not a status quo.
But you could be status quo in disease state.
You can be, even in a disease state, it's changing. Cancer, for example, always progresses. It's always dynamic. If cancer is static, you're winning. If cancer is declining, you're winning. But it's nothing in the universe is static. Everything is changing. And my biggest concern is if it's not changing, then we're in trouble. Whether it's climate, whether it's your body, we get older. Life is a dynamo. It's dynamic. We are going to change whether we like it or not. How we adjust into our new spot inside that box, a lot of times is up to us.
And that's the things we do and don't do, nutrition being key.
Yeah, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. There's no in between. There's no lukewarm.
So if you're abusing your body with overconsumption of carbohydrates or even certain fats, is there good fats and bad fats? I hate that term, good and bad, but
there's fats that are, from a biochemical point of view, can be reacted and managed. Saturated fats are not very functional. Our body doesn't deal with saturated fats.
they're inflammatory.
They're inflammatory.
So what are examples of saturated fats?
Saturated fats are any fats that do not have a double bond in them. I don't want to turn this into a chemistry lesson, but think of it as polyethylene, a plastic. A plastic is totally inert. It doesn't react with anything. If I ate a pellet of polyethylene, it would go right through and back out again. Saturated fats means that it's saturated, all of its bonds are single bonds, and it's saturated with hydrogen as a hydrocarbon. Gasoline is a totally saturated product. Olefins, which have double bonds, are not. So mono unsaturation, that's a good oil. Polyunsaturates are good oils. MCT, for example, is an excellent product. Olive oil, the polyphenols have a lot of double bonds and conjugated bonds. Those are the ones that are reactive. Your body can react and move them around in your body. Saturated fats, they just get deposited. So all the adipose type fats in your abdomen are typically saturated fats. It's very difficult, and very difficult to get rid of them once you've accumulated those.
Yeah, and everybody thinks exercise is the answer, and it really isn't.
It really isn't.
It helps, but it's not the answer.
It's maintaining the functionality. The liver, to me, is probably one of the most important organs in the body.
So we talk a lot. In fact, I'm doing a series on my radio show about the liver, and people don't realize NASH. You hear of cirrhosis and you hear of liver disease, and it's usually alcohol related. It could even be drug related to things like Tylenol and ibuprofen and abuse, or over scripting them. I've known some people that have been told to go on them and never get off of them, and then all of a sudden they're in liver and kidney failure.
Yeah.
But there is a problem just with fatty deposits in the liver, and what people don't understand is that liver is the filter for everything that you take in, and it's the metabolizer of everything you take in. So how do we deal with fatty liver?
Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease primarily is caused from sugar and fructose. That's the #1 culprit of it. I now have children that are 8 to 18 with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease from drinking sodas every day. Giving a child 3 sodas a day, sugar sodas a day, does the same liver damage as if you gave that child 3 beers a day. And people have got to understand this. The good sugar that every cell in our body can use is glucose.
And we need it. Our brain needs it. Our cells need it.
Absolutely. Cancer needs it. Every cell needs it. The bad sugar is fructose.
And worse, high corn syrup.
High fructose corn syrup is probably the poison that's in our food system, and nobody wants to talk about it. Fructose can't be used by a single cell in the body. The metabolic process is you consume fructose in any form, whether it's honey, sugar, high fructose corn syrup, fruit. Some fruits are high in fructose. That's where we get our sweetness from. We don't get it from glucose. We get it from fructose. But when we consume fructose, it goes to the pancreas. The pancreas converts it into TAGs, triglycerides. And once the triglyceride levels reach a certain point in our bloodstream, the liver converts the TAGs into LDL cholesterol. That's what gives us heart disease, causes severe arterial inflammation. It's not coming from fats and oils. Olive oil doesn't increase your LDL. So oils and fats and meat products don't necessarily increase your LDL cholesterol. It turns out it's fructose. It's fruit juices, it's oranges, it's things that have over 4.8 grams per 100 grams of fruit should be avoided. Now blueberries are okay. Strawberries are borderline, but no oranges, no dates, no raisins, no grapes. No juices, no orange juice, no apple juice.
When you make a juice, you're actually concentrating it.
And now we have people freeze drying fruits and vegetables. And when you do that, you pull all the moisture out, but you concentrate all the sugars. So when you take that, you're taking the same amount of sugar as if you ate a large apple, but it's now in a concentrated pill form.
So Mother Nature makes this fruit, and it's to propagate the plant.
The seed.
But it has minerals and vitamins and so forth in it, and we're attracted to eat it because what people probably don't realize is that concentration of those minerals and vitamins is in the skin, like in a potato itself, not into the meat of the thing. The meat's the sweet part that attracts us to want to eat to get that, but there's a downside to that.
There is. Let's take an apple, for example. There's about 538 times more antioxidants in the skin of the apple than there is in the fruit, the sugar part of the apple. There's some in the seeds. So when we eat the apple, we need to eat the whole apple, because the antioxidant effect offsets the inflammatory pro-oxidant problems associated with the fruit. So that allows us to eat the apple, get the sweet flavor, the human desire, but it's offset by the skin. Now, when we calculate how big of an apple do you have to eat so that the skin perfectly offsets the volume of the fruit and the inflammatory response from the fructose, it turns out to be an apple 1 inch in diameter.
That's like a appetizer.
That's a single bite. You know, that's the ideal size. It used to be said an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Now an apple a day will bring the doctor to your door. And what do? We grow bigger apples. We hybridize the apples to get more sweetness, because we know we can sell more apples because people's desire for sweetness. I still think that's why Eve ate the apple. That was the human desire, and she introduced inflammatory disease into the human race.
So the sweeter the apple, the higher the fructose, the worse it is.
Yeah, and it's all based on human desire, and all the marketers of fruit know this. Their objective is to sell more fruit, so the way they do that is they make it sweeter.
Bananas are high in sugar. And sugar is fructose, right?
There's some glucose too, but
glucose, but it's fructose.
It's fructose. Bananas have have about 4.8 grams per 100 grams of banana, and it's marginal for me, because in the older population we're short potassium. Bananas have potassium in it, so it's right there on the edge.
Is there a difference between eating a banana that's greener than a banana that's fully ripened?
Yeah. A banana that's greener is less inflammatory because it doesn't have the fructose, doesn't have the sweet taste to it. So in engineering, there's an equation: in minus out equals accumulation. So I apply that into the biology, in that if I put poison in and I don't take poison out, I'm going to accumulate poison. Now, what we hope to do is work both sides of that equation. I want to decrease the inflammatory molecules that enter our body and increase the out, get rid of those faster to bring down my overall inventory of inflammation.
So there's a saying, Dr. Shepard, that goes, where there's disease, there's inflammation. Where there's inflammation, there's disease. So this is this loop that's forever propagating itself.
That was proposed. I've got a little different approach. All diseases originate from inflammation. Diseases will add to inflammation, and it's actually a calculus equation. So as the accumulation term increases, it feeds back in on the inside of the equation. Cancer is a classic example. So what mutates the DNA of a normal cell is ROS, reactive oxygen species, typically the hydroxyl free radical. Steals an electron from the DNA, and hopefully the cell dies when that happens. It's called apoptosis. But when that cell doesn't die, it turns into an anaerobic cell. It does not need oxygen. When that happens, it wants to live in an acidic environment. And these hydroxyl free radicals are conjugate acids, so they reduce the pH, allows the cancer cell to live, but kills normal adjacent cells that want to live in a pH of slightly alkaline. So when that happens, now your body wants to neutralize that pH change. The cancer says, no, you're not. So the cancer consumes more sugar. Sugar has the OHs, and it's a vicious cycle.
So anybody that's listened to me over the years is well aware of being alkaline, slightly alkaline and acidic, being an electron donor state as opposed to electron stealer state.
Right.
They need to be reminded all the time because you forget, but that is so key to wellness. and that is so key to low inflammation.
It's fundamental. Every doctor is taught this. I taught a course, taught pre-med doctors biochemistry, and it's instrumental. There's entire textbooks on free radical chemistry and biomedicine. And it's fundamental. If at the cellular level, and there's a blood barrier that keeps us from exogenously adding alkaline materials, and I'll go through that. But at the cellular level, cancer will lower the pH anywhere from 5.2 to 6.8.
Which is very acidic.
Very acidic. Anything below 7 is acidic, anything above 7 is alkaline. Our blood is maintained and doesn't change from 7.35, slightly alkaline. So we can't get from what we eat an alkaline like lime. If we ate lime, I can't change the pH of my blood. If my blood pH goes to 7.4, I'm going to be very sick.
Exactly.
If my blood pH goes to 7.3, I'm going to be very sick. So we can't get from point A to point B where the disease is happening. The only way we can do that is with carotenoids and vitamins, chemicals that actually go into the cell, donate an electron to the free radical, and convert that free radical into an OH-1, raise the pH to 11, and kills the cancer cell in 4 seconds.
Yeah, everybody's worried about cancer, and I think it's something you have to be concerned about it. And further on in the show, we're going to talk a little more in depth about that. But it isn't the concern that it used to be, because there is an understanding, and you're talking about it, how to take care of it. Mm-hmm. And if you get diagnosed, that's just a wake-up call for you that you've been doing something incorrect.
That's right. Everybody presents differently with inflammation. Inflammation causes 92% of all human death is a result of inflammation, whether it's arthritis, type 2
including
diabetes.
this COVID-19 with,
exactly.
with the
it's not the virus that
inflammation
killed anyone.
And the cytokine storm. You know, we're at our first break over here, so we're going to be back with Dr. Sam Shepard, and we're talking about something that will change the health and wellness of your life for your benefit. You know, you can listen to me live every Saturday morning at AM 1250 The Answer at 9 o'clock, and you can go to rumble.com, search Dr. Ed Show. It's on iTunes as well, and Spotify and all, so you're able to hear that show being archived. Just search Dr. Ed Show. We will be back. Welcome back to the Dr. Ed Show. We're here with Dr. Sam Shepard, having a wonderful conversation about your health, your wellness, and your empowerment. Dr. Sam, your first job was a coal miner.
Correct.
You ended up working for the government. What did you do for the government?
There were several projects that I worked on. One was on the development out of Brooks Air Force Base with a very good team, Dr. Clifford Sherry. He was a PhD in weapons development. And we spent time designing electromagnetic pulse weapons, auditory weapons. And those were then tried out at Brooks Air Force Base in San Antonio. And then in 2008, I went to work for DARPA, General Atomics, and SAIC on the development of JP8, jet petroleum high altitude fuels.
Okay, that's way above my pay grade here, but I'm a little bit familiar with DARPA, and I know it's a subdivision of the defense, but it's sort of the black ops of
yeah, they have a black
department.
budget. They can pretty much do whatever they have. It's a huge.
Here's what I found.
Oh, that's Siri listening to us.
It's the Defense Applied Research Programs Administration. I can't talk a whole lot about DARPA, but they invented the internet. Al Gore did not invent the internet.
Really?
Yeah. DARPA invented the internet. DARPA developed all the stealth technology. They're in sixth and seventh generation development of aircraft, military aircraft. The seventh generation we're probably seeing, and we're calling them UFOs, but that's probably what they're working on.
So this advanced technology is far more than what we're aware of, what we're made aware of.
We won't really know anything about it. Typically, like the SR-71 Blackbird, I had it explained to me what happened at Roswell, for example, when the whole UFO started in 1948. That was a weather balloon carrying a new metal called nickel titanium. And today you can buy it, it's nitinol. But the entire SR-71 Blackbird was built out of nickel titanium, and it could handle very high temperature, very high altitude, extremes in temperature. So one of the explanations of Roswell, which didn't make it into the Blue Book, was they launched a stratospheric balloon carrying this metal to see what the effects would be at high altitude. The balloon burst and all this metal come crashing down. Well, nitinol has a unique property in that it has a memory of its previous shape. So if I molded nickel titanium into a car fender and then hit it with a ball-peen hammer, put a dent in it, I just take a hairdryer, warm it up, and it remembers, and the dent removes itself. That technology is metal with a memory. Those things were all done through DARPA. But the aircraft that we're working on now, we're not going to know about for 15 years. The F-35, for example, and the Aurora, these were aircraft that were developed a decade ago, but now they're flying, and we're now aware of them. So we're always, the general population is going to be anywhere from 10 to 20 years behind what DARPA is doing.
So there's technologies out there that we're totally not aware of.
And won't be for quite a while unless they think it's in our best interest to know about them.
And who are these people?
The ones I dealt with were Air Force.
Air Force.
Yeah.
I was almost in the Air Force. I had during Bush's administration, I had the Air Force come after me, wanted me to become a colonel in their thing, and I went against it for a while and finally said yes. And then I had multiple abdominal surgeries, so I had to get all those clearances and everything. And finally, when all that went through, the recruiter did a mischeck, caused a 6-month delay. Obama gets in. The first program he cut was that program, 2 days before my commission date, or 4 days before my commission date. So it would have been an interesting thing.
One thing about the government, they can do whatever they want to do when they want to do it.
Yeah, that's what I was told.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So anyway, that's another one of those parallels.
Right, but out of that technology, I had developed an electromagnetic pulse device that could send light pulses through the eye, and it would immediately set that same frequency up inside the brain. The gamma frequency would change.
That's really interesting. So tell us what that actually means, what you can do with that.
I can impart energy into the brain. So not only change the frequency at which your brain operates, gamma frequencies in the brain for learning are, the gamma frequency is about 120 flashes per second all the way up to about 250 flashes per second. That's the frequency at which your brain has to be electrically active to learn. These lights, for example, are probably 60 hertz or 120 flashes per second. Our brainwave pattern is a minimum of 120 because that light frequency coming from that light hits the back of our eye. Our eye is very good at converting photons into electricity. Moves down the optic nerve at 120 flashes per second. Gets dissipated into the brain as brain activity or energy. And in that science, there's an equation. Energy is equal to Planck's constant times frequency. So as I increase the frequency, I increase the energy of the wave itself. Where that became important was MIT figured out what causes Alzheimer's disease. It's a buildup of the amyloid beta plaque in the brain, chokes off the neurons die, you end up with Alzheimer's or dementia or Parkinson's. So what they were doing was drilling holes in rats' heads and inserting a fiber optic into the occipital lobe of the brain and flashing light to activate the microglia.
Which we all have.
We all are. You're born with them. They're not even human. We don't know what they are, but they live in our brains, and they clean all the debris up. If you get a virus in the brain, you get bacteria in the brain. When cells die, there's a lot of dead bodies on the battlefield. The microglia are the waste management cleaners inside our brain, and they're immortal. They live forever. They don't die. They just slow down. So as we get older, the energy drops. Microglia go into hibernation. They don't work as hard. Now we begin to build up amyloid plaque, because that's what it typically eats. So MIT figured all this out. And when they inserted the fiber optic into the brain, and they flashed light at a certain frequency, they could activate the microglia at a certain energy level. Turned out to be 40 flashes per second. That was enough energy to cause the microglia to become active. So then, when that happened, Dr. Li Wei Tsai and her team are the ones who developed it. And I had contacted them and I told them that I had a device where I could change the frequency, the brainwave pattern in human beings simply by putting light through the eye. So we sent them some units, and I now have units all around the world for Alzheimer's treatment. But the light plugs into your standard 110. The computer sets the amplitude and the energy of the photon coming out of an incandescent bulb or a halogen bulb. It does not work for LED. And I explain why. There's an electrical reason why. So this light flashes at 40 flashes per second. You watch it for 45 minutes. Your microglia are activated for the next 36 hours. So there's no Alzheimer's, no dementia, no loss of memory. And you can prevent it. Now, if the neurons are dead from Alzheimer's, I can't get those back. But I can stop the progression of Alzheimer's.
So this is, we're going to be going into detail about your website and what you have on there and what you've patented, which is extraordinary. But this is something that you hold in front of your eyes?
I have mine set up right next to my TV. So in the morning, I have a cup of coffee, I watch the news, and as long as it's in eye shot, the photons are entering the eye. It can be peripheral. But the frequency of that is transmitted directly down.
Is there a downside to this? Negative aspect at all?
No side effects at all. It's non-invasive. We had early on in the development, I thought we could do this in a dark room and just flash light in a dark room. We did that and everybody got a headache right above their eyebrows. And it took us a while to figure out what was going on. Well, your eye, your pupil of your eye is moving at 120 opens and closes in a dark room a second. And you fatigue the muscles that run your pupils. And it gets transmitted as a headache. So it has to be a lit room when you're doing this, so that your pupil is not going full open, full closed, 120 times a second. You'll end up wearing all your muscles out and fatiguing the muscles in your eye.
So we're electrical energy.
We are. We are mass and energy. We have to have some mass. We have to have molecules. But we're really creatures of energy.
Is there a problem if somebody has epilepsy in using this device?
There is. We block those frequencies out, so we know what those frequencies are. And a lot of people who first notice anxiety when they're going down a road in excess of 30 miles an hour on a country lane, and you have the trees there and the sunlight's coming through the trees and blinking as you're going over 30 mile an hour, it bothers people. They can get anxiety as a result of that. That same frequency is one that we understand very well on how to create anxiety in an enemy soldier, create fear in an enemy soldier. These weapons exist.
Okay, so You're saying that you can take a frequency and influence the mind? You have an example of that?
I could probably show you if I had one of those devices.
Okay.
The frequencies are pretty well mapped, but it all has to do with the electrical impulses in your brain. And we can put on a skull cap, measure your alpha, beta, theta, and gamma frequencies, and you'll see them all change, depending on how I tune that flashing light in your eye.
So that could be something that's could be used very positively, like you're describing, but also very, very negatively.
Yeah, we did the same thing with auditory and auditory frequencies. Now it's commercially available. It's called LRAD, Long Range Acoustical Devices. These were developed for military purposes. I could shut down a school shooter in 3 seconds, totally incapacitate him with sound, and they still won't incorporate it into the school systems. So you see a shooter going down a hallway on a video camera. The kids are all in the classrooms. You hit a button, the sound waves 30 degrees, shoots down, completely incapacitates him, and he won't be able to fire his weapon. He'll be on the ground writhing.
Sorry.
But no other children on either side of that will be affected.
Because you could pinpoint that beam.
I can pinpoint the beam within a 30-degree angle. Why it's not incorporated in schools, I have no idea. I have tried. The company that makes LRAD won't sell it to me. They're afraid from a liability perspective that it'll cause damage, and they'll get sued for having that system in place. But we could stop every shooter there is. It was developed to stop people from rioting, so we can cause peristalsis.
I think I have an image in my head of this big round device, sort of like a satellite receiver dish. Is it something like that?
It's actually a rectangular array of multiple small, tiny little speakers that are extremely, it's like how we make lasers with light by putting everything in the same wave pattern. We do the same thing with sound, and it amplifies. So you have 100 of these little speakers all adding the amplitude of their sound in a directional beam. It is the most remarkable thing, and it's available. They won't sell it to me, but
you know, listening to you talk, I'm excited and scared at the same time, because we have such technology that could be so beneficial to mankind, but at the same time so detrimental.
That's what science is.
Yeah.
Science is neither good nor evil. Science just is.
It's who employs it.
It's the same problem with Second Amendment. It's not the gun that kills anybody.
Yeah.
It's the human being behind it. I can kill somebody with a knife. I can kill somebody with a sound beam.
With a pencil.
Yeah, with a pencil. So it's not the weapon. It's still the human ethics and morality of that and character of that human being controlling it. Atomic bomb's a classic example. We could power the entire world with nuclear power, or we could wipe out cities and end human life. Science is neither good nor evil. It just is. The scientific method was developed by Sir Francis Bacon. Sir Francis Bacon got the scientific method from the book of Job.
I saw it.
Yeah, amazing. So, you have this science background, this chemistry background, this physics background, and you've worked your life that way. And now you have something that can help the health and wellness of every one of us. What took you to that point?
It wasn't a career choice. In 2003, I got diagnosed with incurable bone cancer. And they thought I had a cardiac problem. My blood pressure was 280 over 160. And they thought I was having a cardiac issue. So I went in, did all the tests, it was perfectly clear. So I get a call on a Sunday night from a nurse that says the doctor wants to see you at 7:30 tomorrow morning. If you ever get that call, it is never good. So I show up, doctor comes in, he said, I got some bad news. And I said, what's that? He said, you have polycythemia vera, a pretty severe case. typically your hemoglobin is between 10 and 17, 18. Mine was 27. I was pumping ketchup, the same viscosity as ketchup going through my bloodstream.
Which can lead to blood clots and strokes and heart attacks.
I got an enlarged heart as a result of it, of constantly increasing my blood pressure to try to pump the blood through. My heart enlarged.
Do we know what the cause of this is?
We do. It's called a JAK2 STAT3 mutation in the bone marrow. How that got mutated, nobody in my family has it. I think I may have gotten too close to a chemical or electromagnetic device. But because of the time lag between what causes disease and the actual presentation of the disease, it's difficult epidemiologically to go back and say what was the actual cause. But I have it. That's all that mattered. So for 4 years, the only way they could keep me alive was to bleed me. I had to be phlebotomized every month. I'd go in and they'd take my blood out.
You know, that's not an easy thing. That hurts, number one.
And it messes up your electrolytes too.
Yeah.
It changes who you are. So I did that for 4 years, and I'd wake up every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning and think about it. All this is going to end. Death became, I had to deal with it. And I finally just gave up. I said, it is what it is. I have if anybody could figure out the cause of cancer, I had all the tools. God gave me everything, gave me those gifts. And if anybody on this planet could figure it out, in my mind, I rationalized that I could figure this out. And one morning, it sort of came to me, there's got to be some animals, leaves, something living that does not get cancer. It's the negate of what you said previously. And so I went out and found 5 animals that don't get cancer. Salmon, pink flamingos, sharks, elephants, and naked mole rats.
So I have to tell our audience, I didn't know anything about Dr. Sam Shepard, and I received a call from somebody I know who said, you have to talk to this man. And I said, about what? And she said, well, you just got to talk to him. You'll love him. And I said, well, what's he do? Just give him a call. That's all I got. And, you know, I'm busy, but I'm always learning what I don't know. And one day I just sat down, picked up the phone, and I called Dr. Sam Shepard. And I think I told you that.
Yeah.
I said, I was told to call you. I don't have any idea what you do. And I never got a chance to get on Google and Google or anything like that. And Dr. Sam started to talk, and I got to tell you, I was taken in by you within minutes. And then he brought up this topic of I had cancer, and I looked for 5 animals that didn't get cancer. And he said, salmon, flamingos, and right away I said,
Sharks, elephants.
yeah, I said, right away I said, you doing something with astaxanthin? And he went, yes. And I'm a big proponent of astaxanthin.
Yep.
And I talked about it on my radio show. I've talked about it on this TV show. I've written an article about it somewhere along the line. And nobody talks about astaxanthin, and we're going to go in this later portion of the show and really talk about your product and what it does. And you're the only person that I've ever encountered that has a patent on a natural product, which you can't get.
Nope.
I mean, I used to formulate supplements, and I had my own company. I did pet supplements, and the only way I could protect was do a proprietary blend, which had the ingredients listed, but not in the proportions that
Right.
worked, you know, and I couldn't get a patent on anything. You have. It's incredible, but I want to go back. So you looked, I'm jumping,
Yeah.
I jumped ahead a little bit here. You looked at these 5 animals and said, why do they not get this universal death sentence?
Correct.
Cancer.
And at that time, I was working with some folks that I spent a lot of time with in San Diego. Scripps Oceanographic was heavily involved in this kind of research. So when I contacted them, and they had data on molecule by molecule from a mass spec across all 5 of those species, and there was one molecule that kicked out, and that was the carotenoid astaxanthin. And it's what makes salmon pink and allows them to go from saltwater to freshwater, by the way, because they're under tremendous oxidative stress when they do that. The astaxanthin keeps them from dying until they can get their eggs laid. That's how important that molecule is. Since then, we find it in shrimp and lobsters and crabs. So there's now 8 animals we've been able to identify that apparently don't get cancer. So I began growing it. Went to University of Texas, got Hematococcus pluvialis, which is an algae species, and the Entex blow-up pools you get at Walmart, I call them hillbilly hot tubs, I put in my backyard.
You could say that coming from West Virginia.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And so I began growing the algae, and I knew how to stress the algae to make it produce astaxanthin.
Sunlight?
Sunlight is one way of doing it. You have to simulate that its pond is drying out.
So that's that pink ring that you see around a bird bath?
That's exactly what it is.
Or that even around your toilet basin?
That's exactly what it is. And now we know that chlorella can also, which is another algae species, can also produce astaxanthin.
And chlorella's green.
It's green, but if you stress it, you'll see it produce small amounts of that red.
So it's that algae protecting itself to live.
Correct. So what happens is this algae, Hematococcus, lives in pretty arid areas. That's why elephants have it, because elephants are in Africa and they suck the water up. It has the algae in the water, and it gets into their system. They digest it.
But yet they don't, they're too big to turn pink.
Their meat is pink.
Their meat is pink?
Yeah, and their ears are pink. That's what sort of got me. You know, when we talk about pink elephants,
yeah, we do talk about pink elephants, don't we?
Yeah. So one of the things that came out was when I began to grow it, the way I simulated the algae and tried to stress the algae is I simply added salt, increased the salinity, because the algae lives in a freshwater, but if its pond begins to dry out, the salt concentration increases. The algae senses that and says, oh my golly, my pond is drying out, I'm going to get burned up by the sun, and within 30 hours, it produces all the astaxanthin, turns red, bright red, so that now when the pond dries out, the algae settles into the sand, and the astaxanthin is a suntan lotion that protects the algae from ultraviolet light from the sun. So in 100 years, when it rains again, the algae comes out of the soil, turns green, repropagates, and starts its life cycle over.
So it sounds to me like you're talking about an inflammation process here.
It is. It's all oxidative stress. We can now measure it. Everyone should get an HSCRP. That's a measure of your inflammatory disease state. If that number is less than 3 milligrams per liter, so you got to make sure that the units are right too, not deciliter, but liter, the probability of you getting inflammatory disease is probably under 5%. If that number is over 3, you have about a 90% chance of presenting with an inflammatory disease over the next 5 years. And that's arthritis, type 2 diabetes, cancer, heart disease, irritable bowel, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, Crohn's disease, the inflammation from Lyme disease, for example, the inflammation from COVID. It stops the interleukin-6 inflammatory response. It's not COVID virus that kills anyone. It's the inflammation caused.
And then cytokines and the cytokine storms and these people that had these morbidities, everybody loves to use that word, morbidities, were because of cytokines. They were subject to producing more cytokines.
Right, but they were already under oxidative stress.
Oxidative stress,
so they were operating on a razor's edge already, and the COVID, the additional inflammation, threw them over the edge.
And by the way, those masks don't do a darn thing for you.
No.
You know, that N95 that I wear every day in my practice only prevents me from dribbling on you. It will not prevent asbestos from entering, and asbestos is 10 times the size of the COVID virus. So, you know, think about it for a second. If it's not preventing something 10 times the size, is it preventing that stupid smaller particle from coming in?
Believe it or not, Fauci was right
When he first said
that masks cannot stop COVID. And it gave everybody a false sense of security and got a lot of people sick.
Yeah.
Because when he came back out and said, wear your mask and you're safe, you can be safer by wearing a mask, people put the masks on and went to bars and went to restaurants.
Hey, he came out and said, wear 3 masks.
That's exactly right.
Hey, Dr. Shepard, we're at our next break. We're going to have a wonderful segment, and we're going to go into detail in the next segment on this product that Doctor has a patent on. And I haven't started taking it yet, but I'm ready to order it, and I can't wait to see what it does for me. Remember, a healthy pet is a happy pet. When you're healthy, you're happy as well. God bless. We'll see you in a bit.